Well, let's get underway for week 5 of the CMALT CMOOC. And we were just discussing how people are going with their portfolios. And I guess the expectation is that the 7 weeks of the CMOOC really give you an overview of where to head, what's involved, rather than the expectation that by the end of 7 weeks, you'd have a full portfolio put together. So don't feel disheartened if you haven't managed to get your portfolio really taking shape yet, because that's not really the goal. Really, the goal is to develop a bit of a support community around it, provide a bit of a network, and also just give you that outline of what do you need to do to put this CMALT portfolio together. So let's just have a look at week 5. So I've updated the CMALT CMOOC WordPress site with week 5. And I guess for me, this is another one of the sections that I found relatively easy. Communication and collaboration. This and teaching and learning were probably, for me anyway, the two sections I found relatively easy to put together. But having said that, if we look into the project bank, lots of examples of contextual statements, operational issues, and then it starts to drop away quite rapidly. And what surprises me is that we actually have the least number of examples in collaboration and communication. So only 3 examples there, which I'm quite surprised at. I'm not quite sure why that would be. Just by virtue of even being involved in this CMOOC, you're collaborating, you're communicating. And for me, I guess that's one of the keys around technology, is that it enables collaboration, it enables communication beyond the borders of physical geography. And so it's just one of the no-brainer things that technology is really good at in teaching and learning. So I'm just kind of surprised that that maybe people are struggling with this as an area or haven't been sharing examples of that. So keen to get feedback from people, what they think around this section. So anyway, just going over notes for today, just to really sort of get you thinking. So one of the things that I've come across is that I suppose a lot of curriculum design has traditionally been like a solo pursuit. You get assigned, develop this course, and it's pretty much one person doing it. Whereas, the literature really sort of shows the benefits of working in teams and collaborating on curriculum design. Laurillard for quite a long time is made the case for collaborative curriculum design, and working in teams of people with different skills to be able to bring together to create much more authentic course designs. And of course, communication is a key skill for our students. So often when we think of graduate outcomes, it's the big C's that seem to be at the top of the list: creativity, collaboration, communication. And I would hope that those are also characteristics of us as academics, as lecturers as well, that we're not expecting our students to develop skills that we don't have or we don't focus on as well. So I'm hoping there's a bit of alignment there. And also the other thing that tends to be a bit of a solo domain or solo pursuit is research. So I guess if we're aligning research with what we're looking at with the CMALT portfolio, we're looking at the Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning, subtle approach. It's how we take our practice to a higher level by informing it through research-based scholarship. And once again, people like Weaver have argued that a collaborative approach to subtle research can be particularly powerful as well, that we can form teams. And that's part of the core around design-based research. If you've read anything from Thomas Reeves, his big push is that we should be working in a more structured way to research our practice and reflect on it in a much more scholarly way. And collaborating in teams is one way to do that as well. So just a few suggestions around some of the things that you could put into perhaps your portfolio as evidence for communication, collaboration. I use Twitter moments a lot. A Twitter moment is basically a collection of tweets around a particular event or a hashtag, an idea. And I guess you've got to sort of think a little bit ahead if you're going to use a tool such as a Twitter moment, because you can't curate, tweets unless they actually exist. And so I guess I make it a bit of a process where if I'm going to a conference, we're talking kind of past tense now, apart from virtual, or an event, then I make it a point of getting the camera out, getting the phone out, taking photos of my presentation, of interaction, of things that are happening that I find interesting, and tweeting them. And then being able to pull those together later as a bit of a curated, overview of that activity, of that event. So you've got to sort of think ahead. But then you have this really nice multimedia collection, which can include photos, 360, could be videos, etc., conversations around the impact of what was happening in that event in a Twitter moment. Of course, being involved in things like the community forums for the CMOOC or for other SIGs is more evidence around communication and collaboration as well. So there are a few Escalate special interest groups that you might be interested in joining if you're not already. I know a few people involved in our mobile learning SIG, so Neil's been a key part of that for a while now. So things like being involved in special interest groups around technology enhanced learning, great, evidence for communication, collaboration in this domain. And I guess it's kind of thinking through what's the evidence base for that? What's the impact of your activity within these special interest groups or conferences, etc. And what's the impact on your practice, on practice of others, and on students' learning? So just a bit of a shout out to a couple of research cluster groups around the Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning that I coordinate. There's the SOTEL group in New Zealand that's been running for a while now, sotel.nz. Also establishing a Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning research network at the University of Melbourne. So I don't know if you've come across that yet, Stuart, but it'd be great to get you involved if you're interested. So this is our blog site, and just trying to encourage sharing and sharing of practice, sharing of ideas. So it's just a place for people to be able to connect across different domains that are interested in the Scholarship of Technology Enhanced Learning. And if I look at the menu here and the research groups that are currently there, although there's not a lot of activity there, it's very emergent at this point. You can see some of the context. Physiology, optometry, immersive reality, people interested in ePortfolios, arts, etc. And we have an MDAP project, which is looking at data and visual analysis of data in a different way. So just a bit of a shout out for those research networks if you're interested in being part of those, or of even forming a new one. Once again, it's a form of collaboration. So yeah, I guess the key thing for any section of a portfolio is just remembering those three things. What do you need? You need some evidence. What is it that you're talking about, but what's the evidence of your involvement in that particular area? What's the impact? What's the reflection? That's really the key of any section. So you've got your description, you've got your evidence, and you've got your reflection. What has been the flow through of the impact of that on your practice, on others' practice, and on learners and their impact on their learning? And try to weave those through each section. So just jumping into the forum, our P2 discussion forum. There's been a couple of posts there from last week when we looked at the wider context, and it'd be great to get a little bit of feedback from people on there. So Neil's shared his core area 3, which is the wider context, and he's keen to get some feedback on that. Keith I think, Keith, you missed the webinar last week, but it was good for you to post. You know, I guess a lot of the ideas that have been shared have been either UK or New Zealand, perhaps specific. I think Kath here has sort of shared that, you know, a lot of her work is governed by policy and legislation beyond education. And I think that's completely valid to explore those policies and legislations that impact on that particular domain. But what are some of the, you know, particularly for our Australian participants, what are some areas of legislation and policy that are actually relevant? So Keith's asked he could explore, you know, the Australian qualifications framework, you know, the different levels. I think that's completely valid. How does that impact on your practice and certainly on learners? And the higher education relief package. What do people think?
Yeah, I think they're quite relevant, Tom. The other things I was thinking about, and I think I mentioned one of them last week, was the new academic integrity legislation that's going through at the moment. I think that's potentially worth looking at. And I was having a think myself about stuff, and UniSA's very much an equity-based university. It was how it was set up.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I was particularly looking at was how I've included different opportunities for inclusivity and those sorts of things. So I'm not sure if that's 100% what's wanted in that area, but was one of the things I was looking at.
Yeah, I think those are all good ideas. Yeah. I would think that, you know, perhaps one area that you know, if you were interested, obviously these are just ideas throwing out there, but, you know, the new government funding in Australia for education is going to have a huge impact, particularly on arts education. You know, you could talk about that, and how do you think that's going to impact if you're an arts teacher in the arts domain? And there was something just in the last few days around funding for science education as well, wasn't there? I can see Keith nodding.
Yeah.
Okay, so some ideas there. It'd be good to give people some feedback on the discussion forum as well, as you know, sort of brainstorming your own ideas. But collaboration, communication. What are some, you know, ideas around examples that people be involved in that you would think you might want to share in your portfolios? I can see Julie thinking hard.
Tom, I'm trying to think where the URL is. I tell you, since I've changed jobs and moved house, my brains have gone to mush. I did a great collaboration last year with Arizona University. No, it was, her name's gone out of my head. The futures person who we were putting together, I'm going to have to search my email so I can say this more coherently, but it was a global collaboration between different universities, New Zealand, Australia, USA, and whoever else wanted to join. And we're putting together details to do with educational technology in terms of not so much standards, but sort of understandings. What does this mean? What does open learning mean? What do different things mean? And it's all documented on their website. I'm just going to put my microphone, close it again and try and find this so I can show you. But it was a series of meetings and a series of cross-country it was a cross-country collaboration, but I was at Charles Sturt then. At Charles Sturt, we had our own group that worked in our own corner. So it was more of a, you do your bit and then share later sort of thing. But then we came together as a whole group and critiqued each other's work and then came up with this collective statement about certain things. Does that make sense? So
yeah, that sounds like a great example.
It's a great example. I'll see if I can find some evidence.
Yeah, so I guess, you know, so you kind of need to think ahead as well. And is there a way of, how do you provide the evidence of that if it's collaboration like that. And I suppose, like Julie said, it's all on their website, but how long is that website going to be active? And so, maybe what you need to do is create an archive of that, of the evidence somehow. Maybe, even if it's just basically print a PDF of those pages and save it in a folder somewhere, so you've got some evidence for later. But I certainly find that for me, this is where technology really helps, is that by providing that evidence trail, if it's web-based, if you're using social media, etc., if you're using hashtags, then you've got that evidence trail. But it's thinking through, how do you archive that? Because we all know the internet changes and links change, etc., which is why we have DOIs for research, which supposed to be the static evidence of research. So I guess when you think of collaboration communication, it doesn't have to be international. And certainly now with the 3 levels of CMALT, you can think of, well, for an associate or a CMALT level, then collaboration just within your own team is fine, and evidence of that. How do you work as a team? Do you work as a team in technology enhanced learning, curriculum design, etc., or supporting other people in your department, in your faculty? Are you the go-to person, that people email or ring up and say, I've got a problem with, how do I do this inside the LMS or whatever, and providing evidence of that as well. So don't be put off by, does collaboration have to be, like an international global project? Well, no, it doesn't. But if you are aiming for something like senior CMALT, then obviously that's the type of evidence that you need. For a senior CMALT portfolio, you need to provide evidence of leadership, of international leadership, of all research impact. So any other ideas around communication and collaboration, Neil?
Yeah, just 2 points. One is within my school, I got 2 colleagues on this forum, and that's maybe one example of collaboration. And then those, Teresa and Susan, have both done several workshops on technology, and that, I think, for me, they may not have thought, oh, that's something I could include, but I think that's a good example of,
yeah, definitely,
of working with colleagues, and that has been written up and posted on a website, so that's some evidence. The second point is, until I joined this group, I didn't really understand what evidence might look like, and you suggested, for example, these recordings of these meetings, if you actually said something that was relevant, that you could, and it's on YouTube, and then you can highlight that YouTube link and where it starts and where it finishes, and that can be, some evidence that you're contributing to collaboration. And so I think that's interesting to me, is looking for those kind of perhaps opportunities to show evidence that you might not think about, but they do exist if you look hard enough. So yeah, I think that's one thing to think about.
Yep, good points, Neil. And I think, if you're invited to do a webinar, or you're running a webinar series for your own class, certainly if you're recording those and archiving them, that's rich evidence. So I guess that for me is part of the reason why I do tend to record everything I do, because it's providing an evidence trail as well. Not just for me, but for everyone who's involved. And I've had a YouTube channel for 14 years now, and it just started off as one video with a group of lecturers. We're just sitting around a coffee table and thought, hey, why don't we just record ourselves reflecting? And it was just with a laptop and webcam, back in 2006, and that basically started my YouTube channel. And so basically it's a whole collection of activity and evidence. And it's maybe not particularly exciting for anyone else, but for me, it's a record of projects I've been involved in, and I can then cite those and link back to them, etc.
So, Tom, how do we access the recordings from these sessions, for example?
Yeah, so I post them into the P2 forum. I also post them through the Moodle discussion forum, the links to them.
Okay.
So they're all on my YouTube channel.
So they're
And
links to the YouTube channel effectively, or they're
to the individual recordings.
recordings. Yeah.
So if I just go and have a look at those, I'll just show you anyway. So interesting point to discuss maybe. So this is just one way that I work, but everyone works in different ways. But if I go to my actual channel, so yeah, it's nothing too exciting. I've got 72 subscribers, which isn't huge, but as I said, my videos are probably only interesting to certain people. And you can see, so I've got literally hundreds of videos there now, and I guess that's just a process I now engage with. Is I try to record everything I do, and obviously, you get other people's permission, you make sure it's okay with them, and I'm very keen on supporting and modeling open educational practice, and so that's just what I try to do. Interesting to see, change in hairstyles and more hair as I go back over the years. But anyway, so those are all there. And what I tend to do is create playlists for different types of activities. So I run a webinar series for the Escalate Mobile Learning SIG. So those are all collated via a hashtag with the hash Escalate Email SIG. The CMOOCs have a hashtag and a playlist, CMALT CMOOC. So those are all there. And if I go into the playlist, it'll just show the latest one. But it also gives you stats. So if you go into your channel and YouTube Studio, the stats are kind of interesting as well. So I look at various playlists. Where is it? Probably further down. There it is. It just gives you the stats on number of views, number of videos, etc. And each video as well has individual stats. So it's also interesting to see how many people have actually watched, each week's archive. 6 last week. So they're not widely watched as such, but then they're only relevant to a particular group. So for me, it's not about getting hundreds of views. It's just recording the activity that's gone on. And there's Neil there. There we go. There's enough of that. Can't hear you, Neil.
Fine looking young man.
Fine specimen, yes. So, you may not think, well, what's the point of having a YouTube channel? You're creating a podcast show. You're not, becoming an internet celebrity or an influencer. But for me, that wasn't the point of my YouTube channel anyway. It was just a record of activity. And you never know when you want to go back and reflect on some of that stuff. I've certainly found it useful over the years.
Tom, I'm going to jump in here because I found what I was talking about. I've put it in the chat window there. Sorry to be so vague.
That's right.
But this was a great collaboration, and I've actually put, this is the homepage, the one I've just put in now. The other link that I put in led to the inclusion framework process. But I thought New Zealand was involved, but if you look at the community partners, I'm not sure that there was anyone from New Zealand involved there, but it was international. But it was run by Samantha Adams-Becker, who some of you may know her through the Horizon report. Was involved with that through EduCourse. I think she's at Arizona now. I'm not quite sure. I haven't really been in touch with her since COVID. I need to reach out and build some bridges again since after being in lockdown. But yeah, so it was just, as I said, a great opportunity to work within your institution and then beyond as well. So I'd really love to emulate something like this with a slightly different theme to do with educational technology, perhaps around collaboration and what people are doing, you know, how we affect curriculum collaboration between institutions or other types of collaboration.
Yeah, and I guess that's also a way as well is looking forward and it's sort of thinking, well, let's actually do this project so it does become evidence of you know, collaboration that you put into a CMALT portfolio, but you can also use for, you know, getting a research grant or whatever. You know, so kind of thinking forward and planning and trying to be, you know, targeted and where you put your energy and why and what you can get out of it. Any other examples of collaboration communication from people?
Tom, I'm just sorry.
There you go.
Tom, I was just going to put in an advert for the new business education SIG. Anybody that's involved in business education, the new Ascolite SIG is up and running, and we've had a couple of webinars and we've got a community. So if you go to the Ascolite website, you'll certainly find it, and we're certainly getting quite a lot of discussion happening on that and collaboration. We a group of us collaborated on a paper for the Ascolite conference, so it's certainly somebody said they went to my webinar on work integrated learning in business. So so yeah, so we've got another one coming up in November. So big shout out for those business people.
Sounds good. Thanks, Andrew. Stuart.
I'm just hoping, in I think 2012, 13, we had an OLT project, which was across Australasia, building virtual reality resources for teaching across 10 schools all up, but designed through 7 schools. That'd be a fairly appropriate thing around the collaboration and communication.
Yeah, yeah. You know, obviously, you also want to try and highlight recent activity as well. But, you know, linking back to the stuff that you've done a while ago and then sort of showing how you've built upon that or the impact of that over time is really useful as well. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be, you know, everything in your portfolio was done in the last year. No, that's the whole idea of a portfolio. It's a collection of evidence over a number of years.
Yep.
So interestingly, you know, because both Sandra and myself and Mark, I think that's all we've got here online at the moment. We're all on the Ascolite executive. We got an email from Andre, the Secretariat, over the weekend that University of Melbourne has taken out a unlimited Ascolite membership for the next 3 years, which is great, which means, you know, Stuart and anyone else who wants to become an Ascolite member, the entire institution is now covered through an unlimited license, which is great for the next 3 years. There was another institution as well, wasn't there, Sandy, Mark? I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I was just going to look at my my inbox to see where it was. It's new institutional members were La Trobe was the other.
And I think there was like one institution previously who'd taken out an unlimited, but it does sort of seem to be, you know, pointing to, obviously COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of technology enhanced learning, and so it does look like there'll be a trickle through investment, hopefully, in the future to support online learning in particular, but technology enhanced learning, you would think that's a no-brainer in the new world we live in. Okay, well, does anyone else want to share anything around communication collaboration? Have you got any ideas, Jalal, what you might focus on in this area?
Yes, so I've made a list of evidence that I could be using. So I've got just still on paper, so it's a whole bunch of them.
You look very
One of the
organized.
I'm trying to get there. As difficult as it is, I mean, it's that time of semester where you're just inundated by marking and everything else. So, so I've just been putting down my thoughts on paper, so I've got them, as they come along, and I can refer back to them. And as I read more about the different areas, and I kind of think about my own practice, and I've just been noting those examples down. So then it just becomes putting it together. I haven't found as much time to put things together at this stage. But what I was thinking about, there is some evidence around communication and collaboration, but it involves, presentations that I've done that, online. It includes other people. I was just wondering around what is, kosher in presenting that in on my portfolio. Do I need to get everyone's permission if it's a large group of 30 people or 40 people within my own school? Is there anything that I should be aware of in that respect, Tom?
Well, I guess it depends where it's publicly available or not. So if that evidence is, on a YouTube channel like my stuff, then certainly people need to, be aware that it's there, and you should have given permission, etc.
A lot of these aren't. They're in our schools teams pages and things like that. So I'm just wondering, how do I go about incorporating some of that as my evidence?
Yeah, so you could take like a screenshot of wherever it's embedded. So it's basically just an image, and if it is linkable, you can put the link. But you just got to think through those issues of, if you link to some evidence, does it identify other people, and have they given permission or not? Something like just a screenshot of some evidence is pretty harmless, really.
Yeah. So one of them was a presentation that I gave recently to the faculty around. It was entitled "Good Practices for Teaching and Learning During COVID." So it was around different technologies and technology-enhanced learning that I'd undertaken. So it's there. It's been recorded, but I'm just wondering, how do I bring that into my portfolio?
Yeah, I'd probably just take a screenshot of one of the frames of it, perhaps just with you presenting, and then obviously describe what was happening. But it would be also really good to have some evidence of impact. Did people email you and say, that was fantastic, it really helped me?
Yeah, I've got that as well. So can I attach those emails?
Yeah. So you'd want to anonymize those, but you could create a PDF of a collection of statements from emails, etc. If someone used Twitter and gave you really good feedback on Twitter for your presentation, I mean, that's how I gather a lot of my feedback.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking of doing is, I've worked with a couple of people around the courses that they teach. So maybe having a conversation with them, getting them to reflect, and recording that as a way around that to demonstrate that impact.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So, getting that sort of, either getting them to do a little blog post or a reflective statement, or, if they're happy, a little reflective video that you can either link to or transcribe. It's great evidence. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's also, hopefully good evidence for things like progression as well. So it's not just I guess it's, when you're looking at putting together a portfolio for CMALT, sort of think of it as, one aspect of something wider. So it could feed into your progression, or your annual plan, etc. as well. So sort of work smarter, not harder as such. Okay, anyone else want to jump in, share any ideas?
Tom, I just wanted to sort of get a feel for how big a portfolio should be. I mean, often with promotion portfolios and that sort of thing, you're limited to 10 pages or 3 pages per portfolio. Obviously, there's a scope for making this humongous if you wanted to. Where's the sort of boundary to draw between, those two extremes? I think, and paper-based ones are useless really in this respect. So having, online linkable files and locations and DOIs to papers and things like that are obviously, very easy to include. But what have you got any guidelines on that?
Yeah. So the guidelines from CMALT are, think around about 500 words per section. So there's, six key sections. So you're looking around 3,000 words type of thing. And obviously, because you're putting together an ePortfolio, or most people do anyway, it goes much more beyond the 500 words, because, as you say, you're linking to evidence, you're linking to other activity, and so that's really rich, rather than it just being the 500 word post as such. But yeah, something around the 500 words. So there's effectively a page, 1 page per section, and for each of those, think description, evidence, and reflection, but also weave through, as we've said before, the core themes of CMALT, which is one of them actually is collaboration. So it's not just a section in your portfolio, but you want to weave through how you collaborate right through your entire portfolio. It's kind of like one of those key characteristics that ALT looks for in a CMALT holder. How do you collaborate with other people? How do you work in teams? How do you promote the use of technology enhanced learning? How do you keep up to date? So I guess that's kind of coming a little bit back to Stuart's thing of something you did in 2012 is great, but how have you built upon that? So have you kept that up to date, or what is the impact of new technology on what the project was in 2012? And I would think probably access, cost, flexibility are key things around any technology-based project. Hopefully, those are the things that have really changed over time. So it kind of hopefully help, Mark?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I started last week and missed the sort of conversation last week, but I started last week on trying to put a skeleton of a portfolio up on WordPress. So I've begun, which is further than I got last time. I was involved in the CMOOC. So, I haven't made anything public yet. I'm just sort of, I'm sketching out bits and pieces and throwing, what about this idea and what about that and what about this link, to sort of, start building that. So I suppose that's the best way to, to engage for me at the moment.
Sure, sounds good. And how many guitars have you got there?
Yeah, there's a few.
Which is your favorite?
Probably the resonator one's quite good, like a National Steel type guitar, if you know about guitars.
Not that particular one, but yeah.
It looks like the one off the cover of the Dire Straits Brothers in Arms album, if you with that big silver bit.
Nice.
Dobro.
A Dobro style, yes, yeah.
Who else plays instruments here? It's always interesting, I think, just to keeps proving it. Interesting talking to people, particularly in educational technology, that a lot of us have a background in music as well, and I guess that that creativity theme tends to come through quite heavily in this community as well, whether it be music or other forms of creativity. A piano there, is it? Yeah.
It's a pianola, so that's technology properly.
Yeah.
And it's exercise as well, because you have to pedal and push that air through all the holes and to get the music. It's very loud and sounds very clunky. It's from the 1930s or 40s, belonged to the family.
Not particularly mobile though, is it? You wouldn't want to
No,
carry it around. Yeah.
but it's good for the gathered sing-along that we can't have at the moment.
Yeah, I remember back when I was at university, my first investment in an instrument was a, or at least the ones I bought myself. Before that, my parents bought me different instruments. Was a Fender Rhodes electric piano, which must have weighed about 200 kgs, you know. So synthesizers these days come in at about sort of 7 kgs for a full-blown workstation. It's quite different as far as weight goes and portability. There's technology for you. Or even, you know, just downloading a $5 app or a free app on your iPhone and then having a MIDI keyboard controller going to it. It's, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I had a couple of Fender Rhodes actually, Tom. I've got a very big music
A couple?
background.
That's a bit greedy.
Well, I had one, then it got stolen, then I bought another one. Then
Okay. What model was it? Was it a Stage or
yeah,
a
Stage,
suitcase?
because I was working professionally years ago. This is a long time ago. But I've got a whole background in music up to a master's degree in jazz, composition and analysis, but I'm a jazz piano player. But I came to technology through music technology. So music technology, educational technology, that was my pathway.
Yeah, I think that was a big driver for me as well, and why, you know, particularly myself, and I think a lot of musicians go Macintosh, or at least, you know, started with Macintosh, because Macs were the first, well, apart from the Atari, computers that could actually support MIDI. You know, the original PCs, their serial bus was too slow for MIDI, which seems crazy now because it was only 31,000 bits per second. But anyway, now I'm starting to geek out. Hey, well, it's been great to have a discussion around communication collaboration today. Hopefully things have kind of made some sense for people and giving you a bit of an idea forward. Make sure you dip into the P2 discussion forum, give people feedback, you know, post your examples, etc. So that's CMALT.team.wordpress.com. And when you've started putting something together in your portfolio, feel free to share some examples into the project bank as well. And that just gives some, you know, good ideas for other people going forward. So it helps support this community. Hey, thank you, everyone. We'll catch you all next week. Have a good week.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.